Thanks, David, and good morning, everyone. My aim here is to kind of set up the discussion a little bit by outlining how disparities in participation in the arts start very early on in life and persist and expand as a child makes their way through the education system and eventually result in lower rates of participation in the arts by individuals from working class backgrounds. So if we start by looking at the early years of a child's life, between when they're born and when they're 5 years of age, we can see that there's good evidence that children's exposure to drawing, painting and music activities at home or in early years education provision is key to children developing the cognitive, motor and sensory skills that support them to comfortably and confidently engage in arts and music activities. However, we also see major disparities in access to early years provision. So across the country, higher earning families have better access to early years provision and childcare, with only a third of the poorest families in the country with eligible children accessing early years education. The most deprived areas have 32% fewer early years places per child compared to the most affluent areas. As such, access to an arts-rich early years environment depends considerably on the socioeconomic status of a child's family. Once children make their way into primary school, between the age of 5 and 11, the national curriculum sets out the arts as a compulsory subject with the recommendation for an hour of arts activity a day. However, Ofsted's own review of arts education in primary schools highlights that the amount of hours that primary schools give to engaging children in the arts has been in decline since 2010, with very few schools reaching the guideline level of an hour a day. Ofsted attributes this to the arts being squeezed out of the curriculum by teachers lacking expertise in teaching the arts, challenges of teaching more resource-intensive subjects in a kind of challenging funding environment in schools, and also the pressure to focus on maths and English as core subjects. Either way, it's no wonder that surveys show that 60% of primary school teachers believe their schools do not give enough time to arts education during the school day. Now, this may not necessarily be a problem for children who are from wealthier backgrounds, whose parents have the money and the social capital to set them up with extracurricular arts activities outside of school. But this is a problem for a child who's from a lower income family, with research highlighting that access to arts clubs, concerts, galleries, heritage sites, museums, and even the cinema is lower among children who are from these backgrounds. Once a child enters secondary school, these disparities in access to extracurricular arts activities become especially stark. Analysis of the government's Taking Part survey of young people has found that young people whose parents are employed in routine and manual roles, or who are unemployed, are 40% less likely to participate in performing arts activities outside of school compared to children who are from higher socioeconomic status families. There's also a geographic dimension to these disparities. An analysis of a cohort of 10,000 14-year-olds from across the country has found that young people growing up in the southeast of England are twice as likely to play music outside of school compared to young people of the same age in the northeast. Young people in the southeast are also 40% more likely to participate in dance outside of school compared to their peers in the northeast. All of this makes access to the arts in school particularly vital for children who are from less well-off families. But when we look at access to the arts in secondary schools, we see a picture of decline over the last 15 years. Considerable pressures around funding, staffing and government regulation have led to falls in the number of hours of arts children study in secondary school. The number of hours spent teaching design and technology to Key Stage 3 pupils, so children who are aged between 11 and 14, has fallen by 60% between 2010 and 2025, while there have been falls of 11% in music and 3% in art and design over the same time period. This means that when pupils get to the end of Key Stage 3 and start making decisions about what to study at GCSE, their more limited exposure to arts contributes to them being less likely to pursue art subjects at GCSE. This perhaps in part explains the huge falls in the number of young people studying arts at GCSE since 2010. The number of entries in art subjects at GCSE has fallen by a shocking 42% between 2010 and 2024. In 2010, 14% of all the GCSE entries in the country were in art subjects. That's now just under 7%. Our analysis of the Cultural Learning Alliance also highlights that there's a socio-economic dimension to these falls in GCSE entries. Areas which have higher levels of multiple deprivation have lower levels of entry into GCSE art subjects. Similarly, GCSE arts entries are typically lower in the regions of the country, such as the North East and the West Midlands, that have higher rates of child poverty. As children finish their Key Stage 4 qualifications, GCSEs and BTECs, and head into post-16 education, we see similar patterns in falling participation in art study. The number of students studying in A-level and drama has halved between 2010 and 2024, while the number studying either music or design and technology has fallen by over 40%. Again, our analysis of the Cultural Learning Alliance shows that the more deprived a local authority, the fewer young people they have studying these art subjects at the Key Stage 5 level. As young people are in the post-16 phase and considering arts as a profession, further disparities emerge. An analysis by the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre found that the money, visibility and prestige of private schools allows them to attract support from industry professionals in the arts, including through programmes such as artist or filmmaker in residence. Art staff at independent schools often have track records of working in film and television or in major theatres, and this closer relationship to industry gives independent school pupils access to social networks and specialised teaching that increase their chance of securing work in the arts. All of this takes place in the context of considerably higher arts resourcing in the independent school sector in general. In fact, a Sunday Times investigation in 2017 found that independent schools in London have more theatre spaces than the whole of the West End. Given these falls in arts participation between the age of 16 and 18, it's perhaps no surprise that we've seen falls in the number of students studying creative subjects at university. While the total number of undergraduate students has been increasing year on year for the last 2 decades, the number of creative art and design undergraduates has fallen by over 5,000 since 2019 alone. These falls in student numbers, combined with withdrawal of government subsidies, have put major financial pressure on art departments within universities. In 2024, 14 universities across the country were found to have made major cuts to their arts departments. There is still great work happening across universities to maintain high quality and employability focused arts courses. I recently visited Bath Spa University, where they have remarkable industry quality TV and music recording facilities to prepare their students for jobs in the sector. And the University of Sunderland are working closely with local film and TV organisations to give their students work experience and grow the production capacity of the North East. But all this great work is happening in an increasingly hostile environment for art study and higher education. And this challenge of arts education in an increasingly difficult financial and regulatory environment extends across the education system, as we've seen. I'm just going to conclude very quickly by reviewing some of the consequences of dwindling and highly unequal access to arts education. Firstly, as I think Mark is going to go on to discuss, these disparities in access to arts as a child lead to major disparities in participation in the arts as a profession. Secondly, diminished arts access during education creates a further vicious circle. With fewer young people studying arts in schools, especially at GCSE and A-level, there are fewer young people who can become arts teachers later on in life. And this might at least in part explain why there are 27% fewer arts teachers in our secondary schools in England now than there were in 2011. There simply isn't the supply of arts knowledge and skills coming out of the education system to ensure we can have enough arts teachers in the future. The other part of the vicious cycle is lower engagement in arts as a child that leads to lower engagement in arts as an adult quite often. The government's own data shows that there are huge class disparities among adults in visiting galleries, going to the theatre and similar arts activities. Evidence also shows that exposure to arts at home is a major part of how children become interested in pursuing the arts. As such, a lack of access to arts in the education system can lead to fewer homes where there is arts engagement in the future. Now, while this picture is of course deeply worrying and has been one of major concern to the Cultural Learning Alliance for many years, the good news is that there is something that we can do about this. So I'm really looking forward to discussing as a collective today what better policy and practice to overcome these challenges would look like. Thank you.